I'm going to shoot a quick little video to do a couple of things. The main thing is to correct some wrong information that I posted about the Robbinsville Quartet and about the group that performed with at the same event there as me and Corey at the Martins Creek Community Center last weekend. So the group that was performing there last weekend was actually the Millsap family. And so if you watch that video on the far left, gentleman with glasses there, that is Craig Millsap, and he was singing mostly lead. And then that was his son, Luke Millsap, right beside him, the great big gentleman there with the curly hair and beard. And then Dickie Webster, I believe I did correctly identify Mr. Webster there. He was in the back playing the guitar during most of the concert, but he is the one that stepped forward and led the verses of He Can Be Found, that great Luton Brothers song. And then you had Carol Millsap next to him, if we're going from left to right, and I think he might be the younger of the three Millsap brothers on stage there, and he was singing mostly tenor. And then Scott Millsap was the one in the light blue shirt, the other guitar player, singing that very low, powerful bass there. So that's the Millsap family. I mistakenly thought that that was the Robbinsville Quartet. Now, there were elements of the Robbinsville Quartet present there that night, but the Robbinsville Quartet itself is kind of disbanded, I guess you would say, or no longer singing. And I'd mentioned in the post there that they sang for Pap's funeral by his request. That's who he had requested, and it's something he'd planned out well in advance in his mind, and then asked me, and I asked my brother, and he made some phone calls and was able to make that happen. So that funeral happened in 2016, and we have a nice little box that the funeral home put together for us, and it has a lot of information in it of who did exactly what, as part of that service, and I could go back and look at that. Of course, I could also talk with Scott Millsap, had a great conversation with him just this evening, and find out exactly which members of the Robbinsville Quartet came and gave that great performance for Pap that day, the day of his funeral. And there were some folks filling in. And I'm going to try to put as much as I can in the description below this video, because I'm just kind of talking off the cuff, and I'll probably leave some things out. So that's who performed last weekend, was the Millsap family. But the Robbinsville Quartet, so they go way back, of course, way before my time. And this all makes a little bit more sense to me now, because Pap was right at 80 when he passed. He passed in 2016. So it makes more sense, kind of them being contemporaries of each other than the group that was there at Martins Creek, because the oldest one of those gentlemen, other than Mr. Webster, I don't know Mr. Webster's age, but Scott Millsap, I think, is around 64, so quite a bit younger than Pap. But the Robbinsville Quartet began somewhere around 1969, 1970, 1971, somewhere in there. And Pap and Ray, they made their first album in 73. So these two groups, Wilson Brothers, Robbinsville Quartet, would have been starting around the same time. Now, the original Robbinsville Quartet featured a lady singer who sang alto, and around 1979 or so, she moved away to Texas with her husband, who was going into the seminary. Now, I got a lot of great information from Scott, and I thought several times to ask what was her name, and I failed to do that. So I'll see if I can find that out and come back and add that later. Not that this video can be, a comprehensive documentation of the Robbinsville Quartet, but it can be at least part of some good information about them, and maybe folks can come back to this video anytime, years from now even, if there's someone interested about their history. So there was also, joining the group Well, original members, I guess, you would have had the lady whose name I do not know, and then you would have Douglas Millsap, who is the father of the three Millsap brothers that performed last weekend, Douglas Millsap. And you had a gentleman named Robert Orr, who joined the quartet somewhere around 87, 89, and his brother, Morris Orr. They were both members that go maybe not all the way back to the formation, but pretty far back there. And you had a gentleman named Rodney Nelson, who took Morris's place. Morris passed in 2010. Robert is still alive, and he would be around 87, 89 years old. Dickie Webster, the gentleman who is in the video from last weekend, he joined the group, looks like maybe around 99 or so. And of course, I've kind of skipped Scott. Scott started playing bass with the group way back, maybe 74, 75, 76, somewhere in there. The group's bass singer, he went into the ministry. Scott had been playing the bass, and then he started to also sing bass with the group. But those are some of the members that go back to that original Robbinsville Quartet before they stopped performing. You had Douglas Millsap. You had the unidentified lady. I need to track her name down. You had Robert Orr, his brother Morris Orr, and you had Dickie Webster that joined there in the 90s. And they were very active during most of this time and performed a lot. You know, of course, Robbinsville, Murphy, just this whole little tri-state area where we live, performing in Tennessee also. And they had a goal about that time where they would have 2 new songs at every practice session. Now that's really ambitious. Every practice session they would try to work on 2 new songs and learn those, and they got to where they could perform or knew fairly well about 140 songs, and they covered a lot of songs from Southern quartet groups like I'm drawing a blank here, Gold Creek, I want to say. I know Gold was in the title. Inspirations, just anybody that was kind of a really big group during that span of time. The Robbinsville Quartet performed some of their material. And maybe when I'm thinking a little bit clearer, I can go back and plug in more of those groups in the comments. But that's just a little bit more accurate information than what I gave previously concerning the Robbinsville Quartet. I will mention briefly that, Lord willing, I have a plan to, when I'm able to retire, to maybe get the Millsap brothers together, and maybe Mr. Webster also, and we'll see. Like I say, Lord willing, maybe do some recordings of them. Of course, naturally, having grown up making family music, it's near and dear to my heart, and anytime you can capture a great family group like that and preserve them, you know, their audio for future generations, then that's something you want to do. I don't, unfortunately, have the time to even consider doing something like that now, but again, Lord willing, when I retire, that is a goal that I hope to accomplish. Real quick, just 2 more things. I want to do a little shout out to Mr. Stephen Vile. Had a great conversation with him last night about music. Mr. Vile is a harmonica player that lives, I believe, in Virginia, and just had a great conversation with him. He discovered our channel about a week ago, and I really appreciated him reaching out. And so I had that great conversation about music last night with him, and then tonight this great conversation with Scott Millsaps about music. So it's been 2 great ends to my day, sort of musical ends. So just a little shout out to him. I hope to send him some of Pap's music, because his group there in Virginia, they are interested in learning some of Pap's songs, which nothing could thrill me more than knowing that his songs are out there, his gospel songs out there being sung and performed and shared. Last thing, I will just say that our first song of our 2022 Train series will upload tomorrow. I won't say what it will be right now, but to me it's one of the biggest, most popular train songs of all time. Here's a little hint. The guy who wrote it, performed it, made it famous is not an American, but he was an American country star. So if you know your country music, then you know who I'm talking about, and no, it's not Gordon Lightfoot. Thank you for watching. It's pretty well dark here. I don't know if you can even see my face. Not that that's anything to, to miss out on, but hopefully you can at least hear and follow this information. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy tomorrow's video, which will kick off our series of train songs for this year.